Our next speaker is Moshe Gabay. Based by the Sea of Galilee, Moshe Gabay is the visionary behind Keshet Journeys. Keshet is the Hebrew word for rainbow, like God put his bow down, like an actual bow and arrow. That's what it means in Hebrew. Specializing in providing off-the-beaten-path experiences of Israel as a Jewish believer in Jesus, Yeshua, Moshe has hosted tours for Passion, Alpha, Chris Tomlin, Bear Grylls, and hundreds of churches from around the world, always with the goal of awakening hearts to the story of Jesus, Yeshua, in the land of the Bible. Let's hear it for Moshe Gabay.
Wow. Yeah, so several years ago, I want to start with the story. I was taking a group of German, a Lutheran group of German through the Holocaust Museum of Yad Vashem. That's the central museum for the Holocaust, basically in the world, but especially in Jerusalem, from the perspective of the Jewish people going through the horrors of the Holocaust. And we are going through the museum and then getting out and back on the bus. And usually after visits in the Holocaust Museum, it's quiet. But especially when you lead a German group through the Holocaust Museum, it's especially quiet because in some cases it even affects the story of their grandparents, or sometimes parents, grandparents, and it's very personal. So you don't plan anything in the afternoon much if you have this in the morning. And so we're driving away from the museum, and the pastor takes the mic and speaks to the silent bus and says, I want to share with you why did this all happen. And then I already, oh no. I very much don't like people to explain God's will or God's plan in killing 6 million Jews and 1.5 million of them children. I don't think that this is above their understanding that, we as humans can have. But anyway, he says, as mentioned in the Bible, the Jews, by crucifying Jesus, the leadership of the Jewish people, say, let his blood come over us and our children. And so he says that it's Jesus' blood that came as a revenge to the Jewish people for killing our Messiah. And so, I'm half Swiss, I'm telling you. I'm usually a diplomat, and I stayed a diplomat in this moment. And I was just had to first let it think for myself, but then realizing as well that the bus stayed quiet. Nobody was saying anything against it. So everybody just accepted it. And that was one of many events that I had in my time taking people through the land of Israel, that I realized that I want to make this my life mission. Because the Jesus that he believed in was not the Jesus that I knew at this time. I could not believe that the blood of Jesus was meant to not only kill 6 million Jews, to basically persecute Jews through the last 2,000 years. So that's not the Jesus I believed in. And so I made it my life mission to go into the roots of the problem and try to take people on a journey to understand what we've heard now in the last lectures, to really get to know Jesus, who he was and who he is. So I grew up in Switzerland. I was asked to speak about this topic, and then I just actually realized that this represents who I am. I grew up in Switzerland to an Israeli father that is most likely, we don't really know, but most likely for about 500 years in the land of Israel, his ancestors. So my grandparents grew up in the old city of Jerusalem speaking Ladino. That's basically the Jewish version of Spanish. So they're Spanish Jews at one point leaving or escaping actually Spain in the time of Columbus, 1492, escaping Spain and not being converted to Christianity by the Catholic Church. So at one point they left and came to the land very early, and because they spoke Spanish, it shows they kept their identity as Spanish inside the land of Israel for so many generations. On the other side, my mom is from a Catholic family in Switzerland, from a little area where women were not allowed to vote until 30 years ago. So very conservative area in Switzerland, and Catholic area, and then in her early 20s she joined the Pentecostal church in Switzerland. And she wanted to see the Holy Land, and then, long story short, she met my father, they got married. Very unique, 40-something years ago, that actually a Jew marries a Gentile, and they're happily married, thanks God, until today. But my father then, and my parents raising me in Switzerland, it was very important for my father. Even he didn't come to faith at that time in Yeshua. It was so important for me to raise up in Switzerland with a very strong Jewish-Israeli identity. On the other hand, he allowed our mom to take me and my brother to a Pentecostal church in Switzerland. It was very weird for my father to join such a congregation. You know, being Swiss and Pentecostal is very special anyway. But for an Israeli, it was a bit weird, but he had nothing against it, and he allowed my mom to take us. And basically, we then celebrated the Sabbath, we celebrated the feasts. He took us twice a year, the whole family, to Israel. So I had this education, and I went to school, to a regular Swiss school, and I was the only Israeli Jew in school. I'm a little bit darker than the average Swiss, and Moshe Gabay, my name, sounds too Israeli. And so this created a surrounding, my father, and as well my mom. They gave me this identity of being Jewish and Israeli. On the other hand, I grew up believing in Jesus. But until I decided at the age of 19 to go to Israel, I did not understand that these worlds actually are meant to be together. I always thought I'm growing up with two worlds colliding that don't really collide. I'm on one way half Christian, half Jewish, so how do I deal with it? It's the best recipe to have an identity crisis, I can tell you. But anyway, at the age of 19, it was the time of the Intifada in 2002. All my cousins were in some special units in Israel, serving in the army. And then there was a horrible terror attack in a nightclub in Tel Aviv. And that moment, not out of hate to Israel's enemy, but out of my conviction to give something to my family and be part of it, leaving Switzerland, I decided to go to Israel and then serve in the army. And by going to Israel, I realized I actually just spoke to Yedidia, and Yedidia, who is here in the worship team, his older brother, was with me in the army unit when I went to the army, and with me in the tent, and he was the first Jewish believer that I met. We were together in the tent, and it was not clear to me, and that was then the beginning of a journey to realize for me that actually this is how it was. And as Michael, I think Michael, you mentioned it, it's for me it was then the question, how can I have a Jewish identity with believing in Jesus, whereby at the beginning it was exactly the other question around. So today I live in the land of Israel, east side of the Sea of Galilee, the other side, the unclean side, the demon-possessed side, the ones with the pig farmers. Jesus crossed to the other side. That's the area where we live, and decided to build a house. It's prime location, even with the story. But no, it's just one of the most beautiful areas my perspective in the world, is overseeing the Sea of Galilee from the east side. And we decided, Janet, my wife here, and we have 3 boys, we decided to build our house there. And it was interesting when we got there, we lived in Jerusalem and then moved up there, I realized that we are at a very crucial point. And I want to now take you, I'm sorry, I'm tour guide, a little bit of history. I tried to make it 2,000 years short and hopefully interesting. But I want to take you to some major points where at the end the split took place. Yeah? And I want to take you actually to our backyard. Yeah? And this is the beginning. We heard Jeff, and it's amazing to be actually at the end, towards the end of this special event, because I can reflect back and be inspired by the speakers before. But Jeff said that Jesus said, I only came for the lost sheep of Israel. He never visited any Gentile city. He never went to the capital of the city. It was not Jerusalem at that time, it was Caesarea. He didn't go to Tiberias, just, 1 hour walk from Magdala, from Capernaum. He didn't go there. And he said, I only came for the lost sheep of Israel. But, and there's one but, at the Beatitudes, he says the most important sentence to his listeners. He says at the end of the central Beatitudes, he says, you are the salt of the earth. Yeah, salt of the earth means the best of the society. You are the ones going to preserve something for a long time, and you're actually sitting here now is the proof of it. Yeah? You're the salt of the earth. And then he says, you're the light of the world, not the light of Israel. You're the light of the world. He teaches them to be a light to the world. And how are you a light to the world? By good deeds you will glorify your Father in heaven. So actually, to be a light to the world, they're the salt of the earth, they're called to be light to the world, and they can do it by good deeds. And afterwards, he actually does it in practice. He goes on the boat to the other side of the sea, to the area where we live, and heals and actively goes, the first time actively goes to a Gentile and reaches out to him. And heals the demon-possessed. And then he wants to join Jesus and says, no, you have to go and tell your people. Yeah? So it's a great teacher. He preaches, he tells them how, and then in practice he even shows them how to do it. Yeah? So you probably should have gotten it, the disciples. But one thing he doesn't tell us here is what do we need, what are the disciples, what do they need to do with a Gentile coming to faith? Or what does he need to do now? Can he still eat pork meat? Or can he still eat pork meat dedicated to gods? Can he eat blood? That's what they did at that time, the Gentiles. Can they be involved in sexual immorality? At the city, next to this event, they've worshipped the god and were very much involved in sexual immorality. Yeah? So does he need to keep the Sabbath? No, Jesus doesn't tell us what, in that perspective, how do we need to deal, or how do we need to disciple the Gentiles in order to follow Jesus. So that's the first point. He brings it out to the Gentiles. Even 2 chapters later, this healed demon-possessed brings the whole Decapolis area to faith. He did some good job. It was a testimony for many people. But then, from that moment on, it was actually the question, how do we bring in the Gentiles? And we've heard here, and Michael mentioned this as well, it was God's plan, not from that moment on, with Jesus calling them to be a light to the world. He refers back to the calling of Abraham and Isaiah prophesying this for the people of Israel to be a light to the world. But that makes the disciples and later the apostles argue, how do we do this? How do we bring the Gentiles in? And what do they actually need to keep? And they had quite a discussion at that time and came to the conclusion in Acts 15. Yeah? In Acts 15, they decide to make it actually very easy for Gentiles to join. They want them not to join Jesus and still keep some idol worship. So they basically give them some rules to not follow idol worship anymore. So you cannot believe in Jesus and follow idol worship, but they don't ask them to join anything or do anything, not to become circumcised, but neither to do anything what the Jews were following according to the law of Moses. Yeah? So this is another step into the disconnect from its Jewish roots. Then, and then we go into several events, and I'm just pointing out the most important ones until we officially come into a time where the church becomes Christendom. Yeah? Actually, an official religion. And we have here, especially the next one big event, is the uprising of the Jews against the Romans. So the Jews don't want the Romans here, especially most of the Jews were, not most, but the Jews who didn't follow Jesus were mainly looking for a Messiah to free them physically from the Roman oppression. Yeah? So the Zealots, called the Jews who rebelled against Rome, made an uprising against Rome, and then the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. They did another uprising, and then the Romans said, we're really fed up of the Jews. We want to create and destroy anything that keeps their memory to Jerusalem. So it was a process of erasing Jewish connection to Jerusalem. So the destruction of the temple, the Romans thought as well, by destroying Jerusalem and rebuilding with the treasures of the temple, they built the Colosseum in Rome. Yeah, if you go to visit the Colosseum, it's financed by the temple treasures from Jerusalem. So if they thought, we destroyed Jerusalem, so even the faith in this Jewish rabbi in Rome, spreading all over Rome, will somehow die. Yeah? But the contrary took place, because destroying the temple in Jerusalem made actually the prophecy of Jesus that the temple will be destroyed reality. And that gave it another push to spread, but it gave it as well another push to say, God forgot about the Jews, God forgot about Jerusalem, and slowly the theology infiltrated that the church or Gentiles have become instead of Israel. So the next, one of the main next things is as well the Christian theological leaders in this time growing up in the 1st, 2nd century, but especially, and I need to redo this, we need to do this. Jonah just mentioned to me, Jonah is actually, where's Jonah? He's here. Jonah, the media specialist, he actually is he's actually a scholar on this topic, not me, but he gave me a point that's very interesting, that in the year 150, one of the main Christian teachers at that time, no, I forgot his name. Justin Mather. Yeah, Justin Mather. Thank you, Jeanette. She's actually the source of what I'm telling you all here. Justin Mather, he still, in his theology, he was very anti-Jewish. He's from Samaria, Roman from Samaria, from the area of Samaria, but he was already anti-Jewish and wanted to eliminate a lot of things of the Jewish tradition, but then he still believed in the physical promises of God in the Bible. And that's an important point, because after him, until then the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, everything became slowly only spiritual and not physical. So the promises to Israel in the Bible are spiritual and not physical. God will not bring his people from the ends of the world back to their homeland in Israel was never the idea anymore, because everything, Jerusalem and everything, became only spiritual. And this was then up to the Council of Nicaea, where slowly over the years they eliminated the Sabbath, and Sunday as the day of resurrection became the resting day, and then later as well, in this time when they decided that Easter had to be disconnected from Passover, basically disconnecting its roots from everything. And from that moment on, it was basically the theology that the church replaced Israel, and everything in the world as well confirmed to them easily that this is it. The Jews are dispersed in the world, the temple is destroyed, and in some cases, then slowly it started that they could do with the Jews whatever they want. Because God's will to keep them spread over the world, the wandering Jew. And we're going to hear actually from Caleb more about this time where anti-Semitism comes up in a way of the church being in many cases silent, but sometimes as well very active in persecuting and killing the Jews. My family, I mentioned, is from Spain. Yeah, from Spain. The Catholic took over Muslim Spain and then basically either killed all the Jews or force converted them. Force converted Jews became the new Christians, where probably Columbus is a descendant of such new Christians that were originally Jews. And there is my family is from. And I was with my wife in those chambers of the Inquisition where Jews were tortured. Yeah, it's a very creepy place to be. But thousands and thousands of Jews were killed. And then over the centuries, the blood libels in the Middle Ages, Jews were made responsible for everything. And up to the peak, basically the Holocaust. Not that I say the Holocaust was initiated by the church or by Christians, but the churches stood in its majority silent to what is going on. Yeah? And very few righteous were standing in the gap and protecting the Jews, hiding the Jews, and helping out. But the majority stay silent, and even some supported Hitler in his plan to eliminate the Jewish people. So basically the Holocaust, and after that, the establishment and the physical fulfillment of God's promises were starting to question what was this replacement theology. They started a movement to question this because the Holocaust was so major, 2/3 of European Jews were eliminated. And then, State of Israel, of the Jews, and this miracle of the Jews coming from all over the world back to their homeland, were the two main triggers to question this theology. Yeah? And I started with a group from Germany, and I want to finish actually with a pastor from Germany that I asked him 2 days ago, send him a message. He wrote a book. He's one of the pastors of the largest church movements in Europe, and he wrote the book Roots. And he speaks to a very young crowd of people in his church, and this book became a foundation in Germany for younger Christian in especially Pentecostal churches. And he, in this book, I sent him a message. Can you summarize in 3 points what is important for you? Why did you write this book, and why is it important for you, this journey back to its roots, and basically not to be, as Paul said, don't boost over your Jewish brothers. Yeah, that was the problem. Not that the gospel went to the Gentiles, but can you give me 3 points? And he gave me 3 points that actually we've heard today from different speakers. Yeah? And the 3 points that he made is what Michael said, and the picture with the family is, if you are in replacement theology, it's like living in a broken family. Yeah? And the other thing is, if God breaks his covenant with the people of Israel, we've heard that several times, how can he not break after I'm baptized and have a covenant with God and mess up the other day? How will he not forsake me? And the third thing is, we've heard as well today, whatever is important for God should be, on some level or in a high level, important to me. Yeah, and that's all what we basically heard today. So and not because I take people through the land of Israel. Yes, I do it because I'm really convinced of it, but I do believe, and I invite you on a journey, not only physically, but as well in a spiritual way, to come back to those roots. I just think it's the best way to come physically to Israel, because even in a week in Israel, it's an amazing journey to discover some things that changed as well my life. Yeah, great.